I'm Chad Rutherman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And welcome to NOCLIP Pocket. If it doesn't say microgames, it's not the real thing. Today, we're going to be talking about WarioWare Get It Together, a game that was developed by Nintendo EPD and Intelligent Systems, published by Nintendo, and released in 2021 on the Nintendo Switch.
But first, if you give us a like or a rating, it'd be greatly appreciated. On that 100 creep.
Almost
only
there.
4 more subscribers needed on YouTube.
Hey, we did the thing. We said subscribe.
Mm-hmm. And it worked.
Someone did.
We got like 4 additional people in the past month and a half.
So if you want to prove everyone wrong, that the call to action in a YouTube video does not, in fact, make people subscribe, then don't subscribe. That's a little reverse psychology. Anyway, WarioWare Get It Together is the game that we did for Pocket this week. It is a minigame collection, much like games in the WarioWare franchise have been, with a few very unusual, notable exceptions. And the focus in this particular entry into the series is that it has like I would say it is a focus on multiplayer. However, if that was their intention, they didn't do an amazing job at it. It is designed in such a way that 2 players can play the microgames simultaneously and complete them. Or not complete them. So that is sort of the overarching design that you see in this.
I feel like the game's design probably invites multiplayer more than previous games, but to me the gimmick is more that you control the games. They've turned each character into their own little control scheme. Mm-hmm. And that feels like the gimmick to me.
Yeah. If you've listened to this podcast for got way too many years at this point, like 4 years, you may have heard our episode on WarioWare Mega Microgames, the first one that was on the Game Boy Advanced. And one of the things that we talked about is there was only so much you could do if your intention was to only allow every game to be one button and the directional pad. Mm-hmm. Like that, and that was the whole premise of the game was everything was very simple, and so you could control it with just those 2 things, and have each one just be played in rapid succession, and that makes the game. In this game, it is more each character you can learn how they play, and then the game forces you to switch them up, so you're never using the same character for the same thing over and over again. And this has a lot of ripple effects on the design of this game. And I would make the argument most of them negative.
Yeah, I guess. It feels more like a different flavor to me. Because, it adds an extra layer. Instead of just having to, look at the game, take it in, and figure out what to do all in a second, you also have to think about the character you have and how they will be able to tackle the challenge. Yeah. So it does make it harder.
Yes. I agree that it makes it harder. I think that my problem is that it makes the games all need to have the goal, hypothetically, of doing a game like this is that you can make the games less complicated in order to make the player's actions more complex, and therefore deepening how deep
deepening the
depth, increasing the depth of the game itself. But I think it does the opposite thing. The games feel a lot more one note than they did in the older game. I'm sure not helped by the fact that there are more of them than there were in the original game. But to me, it's just you go in, it's always going to be, you have to mash into something. Probably 80% of the time, and then 10% of the time you want to not touch anything, and then the remaining 10% are weird puzzles that you have to do, or memory games, which have existed in WarioWare since the beginning, but feel extremely out of place because they force it to elongate the timer, and so it's just this like weird slowdown. But we can talk about that later. It makes it seem like everything falls into one of a few buckets.
Yeah, everything feels more homogenous because all the different characters have to be able to tackle it.
Yeah, and it's kind of stupid. I think some of the characters are great and are actually like an interesting, cool challenge, but the game gets to the point that WarioWare games get to, where they become difficult to do because you're moving so fast and the games are now on their hardest settings, that a lot of the characters feel like they're a liability. And I would say arguably the biggest liability when playing the game in the way that it's advertised is fucking me or you. Like, having another person there fucks everything up.
Yeah. It's hard to tell whether or not that's, like, somewhat intentional or just, like, a coincidence, but there are definitely certain games where, like, if both of you try to accomplish the goal at the same time, you'll just, like, cancel each other out. Mm-hmm. Like, anything we had to spin something.
Yeah. It requires... and you can't coordinate with another person in 4 seconds.
Yeah, well, you just kind of have to not move.
Yeah.
You just let the other person do it.
And to me, that's like the biggest failing of the game to me, is that I like the idea of a 2-player game and one where the 2 players can sort of like get in the way of each other and do like wacky shit. But what I want to happen is what you see in like a Nintendo Switch commercial where we're on the couch and like we're fucking hitting each other with our elbows, and there's like a bowl of Doritos waiting to be thrown across the room. But what actually happens is that we sit in complete stock silence.
You have to concentrate.
Yeah, because you don't have the mental capacity to both figure the game out and play it. Mm-hmm. And also do everything else that you do in a social situation.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the one that fucks it up. Because there's something about WarioWare games where they feel so simple, so you feel really dumb when you mess it up.
That is true. That is objectively very true.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is a weird social element. But in a way, I kind of like that. Like, the challenge being to, like, know or to like learn when not to move, like to when to let the other person do it, was something I found kind of like fun to realize was a better strategy for certain games. But yeah, like overall, I think it's kind of clunky.
Yeah, it's something, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think there are other elements of this game that do hold it up. I think that a lot of the multiplayer like mini games are very cool, and I'm glad that they exist. A few of them feel kind of throwaway. There's one where you have to
that's just WarioWare, though.
That's true. Well,
just throw everything at the wall.
I needed to be more specific. Because, yeah, the microgames can be whatever, and I won't complain about them unless they, like, are for no reason a 10-second minigame where you solve a puzzle and then have 6 seconds to, like, choose an option. Because the game just isn't built for that. And they've crammed it in here anyway. I mean the mini games that are like the optional multiplayer things. And there's some that are very cool and seem fleshed out. Like there's one that's like a side scroller where you run all around. And then there's one where you like bounce a ball.
Yeah. Smooth Moose had that too. The ping pong ball that you bounce up the tower.
Yeah. And I had a suspicion that this was going to be a sneaky Smooth Moves episode. Because I feel like Smooth Moves is the game that did this game's concept better. It didn't have different characters, it had the different poses.
Yeah.
WarioWare Asana, if you will. And they are... and they encourage the social interaction even more.
The thing I liked about it, I don't remember if there was a proper 2-player mode. there probably was.
Yeah,
But
I don't think
like,
it was like a main mode.
Yeah, like I don't. But I feel like the way that we always played it multiplayer is we just passed the remote. Like when you lost, you just switched to the other person.
Yeah.
And I feel like that feels way more frantic and fun because, like, especially when it gets going like really fast and like you lose and you're like, and then you pass the remote to the other person. They have to like get in spot and like try and like orient themselves and like where's the sensor bar and
Yeah. Say, wait, what are we doing the janitor right now?
What pose is it? Yeah. Like I remember that being like a really fun, frantic experience.
Yeah. Yeah, Smooth Moves rules and is the best one in the series, I think.
It's my favorite, and for some reason I thought that you would not share that opinion.
Oh no, it's fantastic. Okay. I think it's one of like my top 3 Wii games, period.
It is very fun.
Yeah, so it's interesting in that way, and it's something that like we probably would want to talk about, except you can't. There's no way to emulate the game at all, and I don't know where my copy is.
I have it somewhere. I know that it's in a jewel case somewhere, not in the game case.
Right, which is empty.
But I know I still have it somewhere.
We're making on-podcast revelations right now. That's good to know. Next time, we're talking about WarioWare Smooth Moves. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it one day. Yeah, and so you end up with this game where everybody has their own controller and is so focused on the game that they can't laugh or speak to each other. I think that's my problem. I think if it was like more wacky.
Yeah, there's like a showiness to Smooth Moves, where like you have to get up there and like especially there's like the final level where it's like the little dancing guys.
Oh yeah,
it's so funny to watch someone do that. And that adds like an extra element to the game.
It's like performative.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. But yeah, I think the different characters though, like it feels like a really solid idea to like modernize the series, I think, or like to bring it onto the Switch. It's something that's like really easy to understand, like an easy way to like break down, like you get the gimmick immediately, like each character controls different. And it feels a little bit more forgiving, and like the games are a little bit simpler and the challenge is more on the controls. Like that feels more accessible to me, to like a general audience.
That makes sense. And it just makes it difficult for any one person to really get the hang of everything and show up the other person in a way that would be unfun or uncool. It's one of those things where it's like everyone shows up and they're all equally incapable of following instructions.
Yeah, like you get your character, you pick like 4 or so characters, and then you get it rotates through them. So like it's always throwing you curveballs. Like you might get a character on a micro game that just isn't good for it. So yeah, it kind of levels that playing field.
Yeah, which I think is really good. And also later in the game, you end up like I think in the main story mode, it maxes out at 5 characters, but then you also have the option to just shuffle between all of them. And there's like, which is probably the next thing we should talk about. There's like 20 characters in this game to play as.
Yeah, I feel like it's just too many.
It is and it isn't. I think.
Like it's one of the like 2 directions you could have gone. Like you can go for a bajillion characters, so it's like maximum chaos, blah blah blah.
Right.
You never know what you're gonna get. But like I feel like if you cut the number in half, it would be easier to like learn all the characters, and you could maybe make them a little bit more distinct from each other. Because there's definitely a number of characters that kind of overlap in utility with each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's just true.
Yeah.
I think because like there's a couple of options that you have, and like when we were playing, I was trying to specifically pick different characters from you.
I noticed.
Yeah, but there is if you're trying to win the game, if you want to play optimally, what you do is you pick the characters who have the obstructive character traits. And I think that I think there may be too many of those. Like too many easy characters. Like I think Cricket and Wario like both just kind of move and you press a button to do an action.
Yeah. I tended to favor the characters that could freely move around, which not all characters can, and ones that could, like, it felt like Wario I really didn't like because his dash only goes left and right, and I kept wanting to dash up and down. So characters that could also, like, their ability could go in any direction.
Sure.
And there were like
Krygor.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 characters like that I tended to stick to.
Yeah. And I think that the game's strengths come out when you see characters like the 5-volt, I think is her name, is 9-volt's mom.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, who has to teleport everywhere that she goes. Which does 2 things, because 1, it attacks when you actually use it, and then her body is like a physics object when it falls back down. So there's like a lot to that. It makes you think about it. There's a character I think might be the last character you unlock in the game, who controls like a water pack.
Penny is her name, yeah.
Yeah, and she moves in the opposite direction that you're shooting the water, which makes switching into her like really difficult for your brain. She's probably the hardest character to play, I don't know, and I think that that's kind of like where the strengths are, and if they if they leaned more into that, then I think they could have designed more of the microgames around their unique mechanics.
Yeah, fewer characters that are more unique from each other I think would have been a better way to go. Yeah. Or at least it would have made for a more interesting game.
And you see that with Penny as well, because like there are levels that need water in them, and Penny's water pack can actually do that.
Yeah, she can fill them up.
Yeah, so you can spray a dog's tongue and win the minigame for dog drink water.
Yeah.
Whereas before you would have to like move the tongue,
or you have to like put the fire out. You can just spray it.
You spray it with Penny. So like there's like an element of that there, where the characters and their unique abilities have unique effects on the game. But I don't know. I assume that the WarioWare developers were not trying to make Noita.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to make a WarioWare game. But I would have liked to have seen it gone in the opposite direction.
It feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity to not like maximize that potential.
Especially considering it is like the main gimmick of the game. So.
So, to your knowledge, could any of the past WarioWare games let you continue, like this one does?
I've only played 4 WarioWare games.
Okay.
And I don't know if any of them allowed you to continue. I think no.
Yeah, the ones that I've only played 3, including this one, and those ones did not. Yeah.
So, unless DIY let you continue, but I don't know, because it's been a very long time since I've played that none of the ones that I've played have.
Yeah, that's another thing that I thought felt like more modern about this, is that like you earn coins and then you can spend the coins to continue, which definitely feels like a modern system that you don't have to use if you don't want to, but it feels a little against the spirit of WarioWare to me, because it's so short.
Yeah.
And fast-paced that it's not really a big deal. And, like, part of the appeal of it, I think, is to get through it all in one shot.
Yeah. I think it exists sort of as a funky mode.
Yeah.
It's like if you've done the same one over and over and over again, and you can't do it because you're 9 or whatever, then you can just use the continue to move on and get through it to the next thing.
I think the most appealing place to use it is if you die on the boss.
Right.
To not have to go all the way back to the boss.
Especially when the boss is something that, like, is difficult to, like, figure out on the first go. Because, like, that's not really what a boss fight should be. But a lot of them are. And so you end up kind of, like, falling into this, like, I didn't know what I was supposed to do and died instantly.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this on the Mega Microgames episode or not, but I find the bosses in WarioWare games to just fall on extreme ends of the spectrum, where they're either the easiest thing in the world or, like, way too hard.
But what about quality, though? Do you think that... Because I would say I agree with that. I don't think that I have There's no counter to that. One, because it's kind of subjective, and two, because I just agree with you.
Uh-huh.
I think that, like, yeah, you'll go in and, like one of them, the Cat and Anna one, was just, like, pattern matching or, like, fucking counting. Like, and then there's ones where you have to, like, manage multiple things and tricks being thrown at you. Like, I think, like, the very first boss has an enemy who has a little spike thing, but it rotates, and, like, you don't know that immediately, so you could just run into it and die. And there's all these, like, different things. It's, like, one comes from a leapfrog game for babies to do, and then the other one is, like, a platforming challenge. 9 volts, having to beat a Super Mario World level while stuck on the ground comes to mind as maybe not super difficult, but definitely very, like, time consuming.
Yeah, ones that come to my mind are the one with the bridge. I don't remember what character that is.
That's Orbulon's.
Yeah, okay, Orbulon. Or you have to, like, raise and lower the bridge, and it definitely, like, fucks with you.
Yes, it does.
And then the one when Grape Lady falls down, the one where you have to, like, squish the grapes to fill the jars. Which you have to do multiple times. Those stand out to me. It's like, I like them when they're, like, creative. Like, those are very much, like, using those characters' mechanics in a way that's totally different than any of the micro games. So I think those are always fun. Like, that's how I kind of judge what I think is, like, a good WarioWare boss, is, like, how creative it is.
That's fair, yeah.
Or, like, how like, memorable, or, like, how much it stands out.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And obviously, the golden standard to measure all bosses by is that dance minigame from Smooth Moves.
That's the best thing ever created by humans.
Yeah, no thing has surpassed.
Yeah, that's like that's the final boss of that game, I think.
I believe you're right. Yeah, because it's the smoothest move.
Yeah, you had to have the smoothest moves to beat it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The boss thing, I feel like it's a part of the game, and it's not something that I would want them to take out. But when I think about WarioWare, it's like the last thing that I fucking think about. Yeah. It's like, oh, right, these have boss battles in them that are strange. Yeah, I don't know. On the note of the characters having boss battles, that exists, and they're themed in a way because each character is their own stage, essentially. In this game, it's themed as, because we gotta talk about that narrative. Wario made a game, and then it got all glitchy, and he made a Game Boy Advance that is shaped like his nose, and the A button is a poop emoji.
Yeah, it only has one button.
Yes,
it's just the poop button.
The poop button is present, and so each stage is a level that somebody at WarioWare made, and it's been corrupted by a sentient AI bug. Yeah. So, anyway, that out of the way, that's the whole story. At the end, you beat it. And then the current top-selling game, Puyo Puyo, or whatever its name is.
I can't remember the character's name. There's, like, the omniscient, like, game creator character that's like Wario with long hair. That's like pretty fun. I wish I just remembered its name.
Yeah.
Because now I'm just trying to explain it and it's not funny. But I just found
it's funny to me.
Yeah, I found that character very amusing.
Yeah, that is not on topic, and I've already derailed it, so we're far past that. The game is actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like, it does a good job of being, like, I mean, this is that irreverent South Park humor that we all know and love. This is Nintendo's, like, fucking jerk off game where they just put all the dumbest shit that they think of in a year. So it's like, to me, it feels kind of like the most lowbrow Westerners' take on what Japanese culture is like. Even though it's coming from a Japanese studio, it's just like, look at the wacky, dumb shit where they use lots of, like, weird garlic iconography everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if I would describe it that way. I feel like there are a few places, like you mentioned with the garlic, and there's a few, like some of the micro games play into
pick nose,
play into like some stereotypical things. But for the most part, I feel like it's just like really well done, like absurd or like silly humor. I wouldn't really call it like crass or anything.
Sure, yeah. It's definitely not vulgar.
Yeah.
With the exception of the poop emoji, which does show up on occasion. But yeah, for the most part it's like it just isn't it's not jokes that require
like
a lot
ironic
of like
stuff.
Yeah. Very ironic, very like silly. Sort of.
Yeah, I think on our last episode, our former co-host JJ said like some like it throws stuff at you so fast, and that's part of like what's funny about it. It'll be like, pet this dog. Haha, like you just pet a dog. Like there is no joke sometimes, and like that's funny. Like you're like it's like a false setup for no payoff.
Yeah. And then sometimes
it's like, oh, you picked a nose. The joke is you just picked a nose.
Or you peel a banana and there's a guy with a bunch of muscles inside of it.
Like something just very unexpected.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Oh, we gotta call out returning character. This game brought a lot of characters back. All of them, I would guess.
Yeah, you're more knowledgeable about this. Penny was the only one that I felt like I didn't recognize, but...
I believe that she's been in other games, but like I said, I haven't played an entry in this series for like 10 years. That wasn't the first one. So I won't know 100% for sure, but like, yeah, I didn't know Penny. I didn't know... the Red, I think.
Oh yeah, the little devil.
The devil that is like Ashley's sidekick. Yeah, I don't know several of these characters, but like you see pretty much anything that you've seen in a WarioWare game before, they brought back, including the most important character, guy who drinks water too fast from WarioWare Smooth Moves. In this game, you have to make his tea as he stares intently at it. But it's wonderful that he came back because he's always been one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, and they do have the dancing guys from Smooth Moves in the background of a stage.
The polygonal dudes.
Yeah, the dancing polygon team.
That's probably internally what they're called. But yeah. The point I was originally making was that you do go to each individual person's level, and so every level has this, like, theme, and you would think, like, oh, okay, like, it's based on the character, but no, it's kinda, sorta. Ashley's a witch, or a mage, and her level is about food, and Mona is, like, fucking modern technology or something, and it's like Icon is a toilet. It's like very strange and like loosely themed around these things. But do you have a favorite one?
The only one that really stands out is 9 volts. Like usual, it's like based on different Nintendo games.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, I don't think I would have noticed that each level had a different theme if it was not pointed out to me.
That's fair. Yeah, because a lot of it is sort of...
And there's a lot of repeat games as well.
They do stuff some game... Well, they made this game... Well, okay, this is my next and probably my final topic of discussion that we'll get into in a second. But they do repeat a lot of games, which does muddy the waters a bit. But I find the themes to be good in their vagueness, because I do like the idea of having like a loose understanding of like what you're looking at, because it at least like takes one thing off your mind when you start playing the game. And the games have always kind of had this, like, this loose theming, and I've always been a fan of Crygor's stages, because they use a lot of, like, photorealism in their art styles, and it just looks really wacky and out of control. But yeah, 9 volt stages are always the best. The classic Nintendo game
they
thing,
stand out, yeah.
Yeah, it really does, like, draw your attention to them. My personal favorite game this time around being the select the correct... This does, by the way, break my rule if I don't like games that are just puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
But the perfect tea time game from Fire Emblem.
Yeah, from Three Houses.
Yeah.
Well, it's especially funny because I remember you watching me play that game and you finding that whole, like, tea time, whatever it's fucking called, thing really funny. And then the fact that they, like, singled that out and put it in this game, it's just, yeah.
I would say
brings
that...
a smile to my face.
I would say that me and the WarioWare team must have a shared sense of humor, but I played WarioWare so much when I was so young that I assume that I just inherited it from them. But yeah, me and whoever's like the lead game puller for 9-volt stages had the same thought where you were like, man, the perfect tea time thing is a very funny thing to be in a video game. And it's funny here as well. But the rest of 9-volt stages also are just real good. A lot of them, I think, feel more like the traditional WarioWare Press A kind of game. And I sort of appreciate that after, like, many stages of, like, oh, okay. So on this character, I can never stop moving, and I have a homing boomerang. So it was a little refreshing. So I agree with you. I'd say 9-volt Krygor, my favorites. I don't know if you have something pressing that you want to bring up.
Not pressing, but I do have I guess a topic to close out with.
Okay, cool. This is the last thing that I have. I think I have some notes on sort of like visuals, music, that kind of thing. But my big thing here that I'm curious about what you think. As well as a taboo subject for the NOCLIP podcast. It's a topic that we only bring up when we feel particularly passionate about it.
Okay, this might actually overlap with what I was going to talk about. So,
okay.
if I'm guessing correctly,
is it the fact that this game is completable in the amount of time that it takes to take a shit, and it costs $60?
Yeah, so that ties into my thing. It's not exactly what I wanted to talk about, but I figured it would come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, like, as you kind of alluded to, we are adults with disposable income, so we especially, and I think we, like, appreciate how much effort goes into, like, making a game and how they're kind of underpriced to begin with. So we don't really care about paying money for games most of the time, but like it is kind of a tough pill to swallow when this game, especially coming from a company like Nintendo. This game takes like maybe 4 hours at most to beat, and it's full retail price. I feel like at least it should have been like $40 at most. Yeah.
That is basically my thesis on it as well. I think like and like coming from Nintendo it means multiple things here. Like you do expect a level of like cost for or like value for the amount that you're paying. Like not every Nintendo game is going to be great. Star Fox Zero does exist. And not every Nintendo game is going to be like a big sprawling thing like a Breath of the Wild or like any fucking Zelda game. But there's something there that makes them worth purchasing in a way that you're going to like, that's going to make people a fan of the game. That's true almost universally among Nintendo games.
Something to latch on to.
Yeah. And so it was weird to see this game, which was a sequel in a franchise that has a long line of selling its new games mostly on handheld consoles with a new gimmick or spin on it and making it fresh. And to me, it felt like this was just the point where they ran out of ideas a little bit. But the second half of it, though, is like when it comes from Nintendo, you also know you're not getting this game on sale. Or you're not getting it for less than $40. That's probably for sure. Unless you buy a physical copy, which honestly I don't even know if this game got.
Probably.
It probably did, but yeah. So I was a little bit like, the content is there. This is similar to when we were talking about Superhot. It's like there is replayability in the form of like all of the quote unquote missions and all the mini games and going for high scores on stuff. But the amount of bespoke new content to do is very small. And a game like WarioWare can't be pushed to be like an 8-hour campaign, because it would kill people, I think. But I was expecting something like, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I duped myself.
Yeah.
Like, I bought a WarioWare game for $60 on release because I was excited to play a WarioWare game. And when I got to the end of it, I was like, well, I'm never touching that again. And then later it dawned on me, like, man, I've paid a lot less for things like that before. Mm-hmm. And to me, it just feels like the value proposition is not as here as it normally is.
Yeah, it feels like it could really benefit from like a Mario Kart 64 like battle mode, like some kind of like killer like multiplayer thing that people are going to want to play over and over again. And it doesn't really have anything like that. Yeah.
The modes that are there are very sort of repetitive, and they wouldn't hold a group of people's attention very long, unless they were like diehards. So,
yeah, and I guess the thing that I wanted to talk about was just like since the Switch has come out, like it's been the thing for Nintendo that like has unified their home console and handheld markets, and I feel like this is like an example of a way that that's kind of like a bad thing, because they did have some franchises that were like exclusively handheld games, like Pokemon has really struggled to adapt, and as a standout example, and in WarioWare is one of those games where like, even though I never played any of the ones on the DS, I feel like I associate the series with the DS. Like it's just where it feels like it's at home.
Yeah, and there's touched and twisted. Yeah,
yeah. There's other things like things like Phoenix Wright and like Professor Layton. Like there's a lot of like handheld Nintendo or Nintendo affiliated type games that feel like they just really worked on like the DS and the Game Boy Advance before that. And yeah, I feel like they don't really know where to fit in this new Switch era, which is just something this game made me think about. Like, this game was on the DS, I don't think I would feel disappointed with it.
Right. I think I kind of agree. And like, if I paid $40 for it as opposed to $60, like,
that's a part of it.
It's one of those things where it's like, I feel like the game part of WarioWare isn't the selling point. And so when WarioWare has come to home consoles before, it was in a vastly different form than it normally is. Smooth Moves was a much more physically based game.
Yeah, the Wii gimmick really did a lot for it.
Yeah, it like fit well into it.
And then this game doesn't have a gimmick, really.
Right, it's just games. The gimmick is like more of a mechanical thing as opposed to a physical thing. And like when the WarioWare game that was on the Wii U came out, that one wasn't a microgames game.
Yeah, it
was a mini games collection.
It wasn't called WarioWare.
Yeah, it was called like
Game and Wario.
That was it. Yeah. And so it's just this like it doesn't fit in this context, and I think that's a good observation. I think it feels weird to be on the Switch because I was playing it on a TV.
Yeah, it really stood out to me because I hadn't really thought about that, and the Switch has been out for like 5 years now. So yeah, this just made me like just really chew on that idea.
It does help explain what the fuck is happening with Pokemon these days. It's just a very confusing situation all around.
It's not to get too into Pokemon, but like it's just been like, I think, an inevitable thing that Pokemon was going to have to transition to 3D at some point, and they've just gone kicking and screaming into it. Because I think, like Game Freak was like a group of people who really just don't have any experience making 3D games.
Mm-hmm. And they chose not to hire anyone. Anyway, more on that eventually.
I mean, good on them for not firing all the people they already had.
That's true. Now we just have a bunch of fucking grandmas and grandpas sitting around IMAX trying to figure shit out. Anyway, I do want to mention briefly, I think this is not the Nintendo franchise that has the best music, but, like, it does. It's just, like, the silliest, goofiest music, and I think this game brings back a lot of old favorites and also really nails its tone again.
Does it have the Ashley theme song?
It might, but it's not played in the main story.
Okay, that's a shame.
It's a great one. But yeah,
that was always like a really standout song to me in Smash Brothers Brawl.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I finally played WarioWare, I was like, "Oh, right,
that's
what this is from." That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all I really had to say about that. I just wanted to mention that.
It is good. Yeah, it's got a very distinct style to it.
Yeah. Do we have 3, 2, 1? Final thoughts, go.
My final thoughts are, this felt like a pretty solid attempt to modernize the series. It feels like it makes sense. Like, it feels like a more accessible, like, each character controls a different way, and, like, that's the gimmick. Like, I have to figure out and learn how each character controls. So, yeah, it feels very, like, approachable in that way. But I do think, it feels a bit short for the price, and it feels like it's lacking a little bit in variety. And I don't know if it is more than the other ones, or if it just feels that way. Once again, because my expectations are different because it's on a home console. Mm-hmm. So I guess kind of mixed feelings. On one hand, it feels like what you'd expect. It feels like a WarioWare game, and that means it's pretty good. But then on the other hand, it feels lacking. So I guess I fall kind of squarely in the middle.
This is a real classic NOCLIP moment.
I give it a thumb sideways.
Yeah, I think in the spirit of the last time that we talked about WarioWare, a lot of the same things that this game does, it does pretty well. I think that a lot of the games, the humor lands, I think, pretty much all the time, even when it's like a little bit wild. And the microgames themselves still elicit a reaction in a way that is what really drew me, at least, to the franchise in the first place. Just sort of the outlandishness of the whole idea. But I think that the design of the game suffers a bit from its chosen gimmick, in this case the multiple characters having different things, and I wanted this game to be finally a new entry in NOCLIP where we actually play like multiplayer games, but the experience of playing the multiplayer version of this game just wasn't fun in comparison to what I had in my head. So I think this game creates a lot of expectations that it cannot meet, and that's why I come off disappointed in it. But I mean, the game is fine. If you can get a physical copy of it for cheap, it's going to be fun to play. But the same issue that you mentioned at the end there, it's very little to do that it's difficult to sort of like even make it a thing to focus on. So that's why it's on Pocket. Last time we didn't have Pocket, we tried to stretch an episode about WarioWare out to an hour and a half and didn't quite make it.
I think it was pretty well done, and that's one of our most viewed episodes.
I ended on we'll talk about that off cast. That's a secret. I forgot to change the featured video for like a year.
Oh yeah,
content that they can't know about. Anyway, thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're talking about Gora Go, a puzzle game, and I'll leave it at that.
An artsy-fartsy puzzle game.
Yeah, we're getting back into some classic NOCLIP, and we're going to smell our farts a bit on this next episode.
Uh-huh.
And really enjoy this pretentious puzzle game. Until that time, though, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website. I almost said on the Nintendo Switch.
All of our content is now on Nintendo Switch.
All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find links to our email address, our Twitter account, the fucking podcast on Apple iTunes and Google Podcasts, as well as a link to the YouTube channel where you can listen to episodes on WarioWare. We just did one on new Pokemon Snap that I think has a similar vibe to the energy we're given today.
Mm-hmm. But we did Zelda and Kirby for November. We did a somewhat intentional, somewhat unintentional Nintendo month.
Mm-hmm. And then this episode ends up falling a little bit into December, but
yeah.
don't think about or worry about it. So yeah, lots of good stuff to check out there.
Mm-hmm. And the YouTube videos have gameplay footage to watch.
Yes.
If you care.
Also, if it's after episode 100.
Yes.
Or 99, actually, but whatever.
A Hat in Time is the first episode with footage.
Yes. A Hat in Nines, because it was episode 99, gameplay footage. This series, though, the Pocket doesn't have
it, no?
Yeah. So anyway, smash the like button within 3 seconds or you'll lose a life.
Oh my god.
Anyway, so what we were talking about before was like, Andy thought that was hilarious, but he muted his mic.
Mm-hmm.